Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just on the second reading of a bill, normal to talk to some of the amendments that the committee has made to the bill that was originally introduced to the House. This is the first opportunity members, and particularly members of Finance and Expenditure or spokespeople, have to comment on the changes that have come from the process, Mr. Speaker, because in fact regarding the electricity bill there were some the process was very robust, and I think it shows the Select Committee in action with respect to the previous Speaker. Yes, they've got a minority report in there, but overall, as we went through the process, I think some good changes that the Minister acknowledged were put through. We referred, and I acknowledge the hard work of my committee, the Finance and Expenditure Committee, and officials that got us to this place, and including some members on the opposition who were subbed in and off because it was their particular area. Mr. Speaker, 15th of December was when we called for submissions on this bill. They were open for a long time because it was until the 26th of Feb, just before the new Parliament, or just after the Parliament resumed in 2010. But interestingly, as we went through, some issues arose from the submissions. We received a letter from the Minister which pointed us to an SOP he intended to bring to, and our committee, which had some quite changes to the original bill, actually, Mr. Speaker, and the committee decided to reopen for submissions, particularly, but only on this SOP as intended. And once again, all credit to the process, sir, because from the submissions on that supplementary order paper, which is before us, or at least the original, further changes were recommended by the committee, and I'm sure members from down south will be talking about the Waitaki various issues down there, which I'll speak to in another reading of this bill. But there was very interesting. I did learn a lot about that part of the world, Mr. Speaker. But I do acknowledge the changes which are alluded to in the commentary and, of course, throughout the bill, Mr. Chair. But I do want to make a couple of points in particular that I will note that this bill actually does balance essential priorities in the energy sector. This bill adds equity and environmental protection and imposes coherent policy solutions to a very troubled sector, as we've seen 72% increases in power while the opposition was in power. This bill does implement proposals that have been properly evaluated, and goodness gracious me, Mr. Speaker, if the previous government had 10 or 9 years to evaluate various solutions to the problems they now seem to acknowledge, well, goodness gracious me, they're suddenly saying that this government has got a bill in front of us to try to fix some of these problems, and now they're voting against it. I don't quite know what's up there. One thing, this bill will not control price increases. That's quite correct, Mr. Speaker. It's not intending to. This is not the socialist nirvana that perhaps some members opposite might want, but what this bill will do is provide the opportunity to, at the very least, start to slow down the crazy increases we've seen in the price of retail power, business power, over the last 5 years or so, Mr. Speaker. 72% over the last 6 or 7 years, absolutely outrageous, 72%. And a previous speaker had the absolute audacity to speak about pensioners being pinched, not acknowledging or even apologising, which might have been even more polite, those same consumers which were faced with 72% increases over their term in government, Mr. Speaker. I will acknowledge, actually, that those same pensioners, or in fact superannuitants, I think is what she really meant to say, are actually better off, a married super couple are actually better off by $78 per week, Mr. Speaker, $78 per week better off to help because of the changes this government has brought forward to at least help them get through and as a result of tax changes and indexation to super, Mr. Chair, to help cope with some of the increases in some core needs such as electricity, which we of course all face, and some consumers do face a difficult time in meeting some of these obligations, as we all acknowledge, and this bill is actually about trying to address some of the structural problems which have led this sector to get out of control. Mr. Speaker, I'll just make one or two other points. I've yet to hear, but perhaps we'll hear it in other speakers, apologies from the other side for the brownouts that we had during their terms, the threat of blackouts that we had during their terms, every winter we went through this these schemes, these programs, these publicity schemes. We had to turn our power off because of the lack of management, the total mismanagement, the structural inadequacies that the previous government did not address in the electricity, Mr Speaker. I look forward to discussing this bill and these amendments further as we move it through the House. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Chris